Hello and welcome to Film Slam Stream's post-film conversation for Save the Cat. My name is Eric Siler, and I'm an instructor of film, media arts, and communications, as well as moderator for this conversation. We're very pleased to be joined by the director of Save the Cat, Jordan Matthew Horowitz. Jordan is an Emmy Award-winning director of both documentary and narrative film. He has received numerous awards and accolades for his work, and he's joining us today to talk about one of his latest projects, Save the Cat. Hello, Jordan, and welcome.
Thanks. Thank you for having me.
It's so good to have you. Oh, what a feel-good story. I mean, things like this just don't happen. It's like only things like this happen in the movies, and you made one. You made a documentary about this. This is
Right.
so good. Can you tell us a little bit about how this story came to your attention?
Yeah, well, one thing I like to do is I like to look at a lot of feel-good websites. There's a few out there that just kind of focus on positive news because, as you know, there's just so much negative news out there and negativity in general. And I feel like it tends to weigh us down, or at least me, it weighs me down quite a bit. And I find that these feel-good websites are a way for me to kind of decompress from that. Reminding me that there's, good people out there and things like that. Usually they're not the types of stories on these websites that would lend themselves to making a film about, because they could be more focused on like a scientific breakthrough or a promising research study or something like that. But every once in a while, you'll see a really positive human interest story. And I was just really fortunate that there was a little story that a local reporter had written about this family shortly after being reunited with their cat, because he works in animal rescue. This reporter, he has a side business doing animal rescue. So he was so moved by it that he pitched it to his local news station, and they're like, sure, go for it. So he did a little story on it. I happened to catch that story, and I was just so moved by it that I was like, yeah, I really want to make a film about this. And I reached out to the reporter, who was able to put me in touch with the family, and they were kind enough to come let me spend some time with them.
Oh, great. So you spent some time with the family, but then again, you had to tell this story and had to track down all these people, Caroline, Angelica, Mimi, and so forth. Tell us about the process of trying to track everyone down and actually putting the story together.
Yeah, the process wasn't as hard as you might think, because we had the family's blessing. And I would say Maria was kind of the central element in the film that connected all the dots. So I knew through what I'd read in the article and through what Maria had told me, all the pieces that were connected to telling that I wanted to reach out to tell this story. I knew what the whole spider web, the network of people, looked like, and she was able to get me in touch with most of them. And then some of the other people that she got me in touch were able to kind of get me in touch with the ones that she couldn't. So she was kind of the central element to making that happen. And I find with documentaries in specifically, usually there's one central figure that kind of can help you connect all the dots that you can't necessarily do on your own, or that would take you a very long time to do on your own. The challenge with this film is I always knew it was going to be a short film. Just you can kind of tell when you hear about a story, you can kind of tell, like, you get a sense of in your head, like, oh, this feels like a really big thing. This feels like a feature film, like a 2-hour movie. Or you could say, this feels like it should be condensed and told in a very succinct, short way. That's how I felt with this story. I always knew it was going to be around the 25-minute mark. However, the challenge with this one in particular is usually with a very short film like this, you only have, to be honest with you, usually it's one subject who's talking throughout the film. Every once in a while, you'll have two subjects. This film in particular has many, many people speaking, telling the story, because there were so many different people that had a part to play, a very important part. And it always comes at different points in the story. So it's almost like they would be passing the baton from one to the other. And in order to do that, I would need each person to tell me their version of the story from beginning to end all the way through. So I actually ended up with a huge amount of footage, more than enough to tell a feature film, if a 2-hour film, if I wanted to. but I still, even with all that footage, I knew I wanted to still keep it in this length. So what I ended up doing was putting all the footage kind of on top of each other in the edit so that you would hear the complete story from everybody, and then I can kind of decide who I want to tell this part of the story, who I want to focus on this part of the story, and get them to keep passing the baton. It was actually more complicated than it sounds. It got a little harrowing at times. And where it really got complicated is, and this is the first time this has happened to me, when you have so many people telling the same story, but through their experience of it, everybody remembered things a little differently. And there's actually several moments in the film where people had they remembered the events happening differently. And when we got into the editing room, I realized, oh, wait, this person said this happened here, but this person is saying, you know what I mean? It was all just 80% of it was spot on, but there's just these little differences that made figuring out how to edit the story so that it still makes sense to the audience just a little tricky. But I think we pulled it off. So
You absolutely did. Well, pull it off. It was just amazing, captivating how to do it. One thing about this story is when people see this film, they already know the outcome, but you found a way to keep us engaged, even though we know what's going to happen. The girl's going to get reunited with her cat and so forth. So knowing this, going into the film, what specific things did you do to keep our interest going along, even though we knew the outcome of the film?
it's so funny that you say that. I'd be curious to hear what your students think about that, because we've had a lot of people, they're going in to watch the movie, or I'm telling them about the movie, and the first thing they ask is, what happened to the cat? Did they get the cat back? And they're very worried about that. And I've actually had people say, like, I can't watch this movie. And because I'm like, my response is always like, well, watch the movie. I don't want to spoil the ending for you. Like, that's the big reveal. And they're like, no, I'm not going to watch this film unless I know that cat's okay. I can't go through this experience and then find out the cat didn't make it, right? So it's funny that you interpreted. I don't think everybody necessarily shares that interpretation. Like, I do think some people are like kind of on pins and needles while they're watching it, but I don't know, who knows? I guess everybody probably has a different idea in their head going into the film. But sorry, what was the rest
Oh,
of
interesting. Okay, that's an interesting take, because I just thought people go into the film knowing what the outcome is. And as a director, sometimes you want the people to know the outcome, and you just try to build the story and move them along anyway. Did you do anything specifically?
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, I think just, obviously withholding it till the climax. All films, whether they're documentaries or narrative films, are actually structured in a very similar way. The simplest way to say is you have a beginning, a middle, and an end. There's deeper ways you can go about expressing that, but for the ending, that's the big payoff, right? So that's the big reveal. So obviously we saved it for that. And there's a lot of things we did throughout the film to kind of work in the idea of maybe they're not going to make it. Maybe the cat's not going to make it. For example, the cat gets hung up at customs, and they have a really hard time getting the cat to certain places, like getting the cat to Bucharest. Or when they finally do get the cat to Bucharest from Ukraine, the person that was supposed to take care of the cat in Bucharest has to leave all of a sudden because they get a visa in London, and all of a sudden their whole family moves. So there are a lot of basically we're throwing a lot of obstacles, which are all real. They're all organic. They all came out of the interviews of what the family or what the cat went through. And the things the strangers had to do, this group of people had to do, many of them whom were strangers to each other, and had never even met the family, in order to solve those problems. Mimi, for example, hurting her foot in Bucharest and only having like a day to get the cat. Like, there's so many crazy things that happen for this story to have actually happened in real life, that it wasn't hard for me as a filmmaker to kind of make the audience think maybe this might not happen, because there were so many moments where it would, like, just a little dime's turn, it could have not happened. So I think sometimes in life, the universe can just kind of line up. Things can serendipitously just kind of line up for you if you're trying to go about doing the right thing and you have the right group of people trying to help you move that along. And I think the family got very lucky that that's exactly what happened in this case. And I think we got lucky as storytellers that all those things happened, because it obviously made for a much more compelling story.
You mentioned earlier, excuse me, about the subjects. Did you ever consider making the cat a subject, like putting a camera on the cat, showing the cat's perspective at all while
Cam.
traveling?
Well, so I didn't have access to the cat
Right.
while
To
traveling.
recreate it, yeah.
Yeah, this all came back to me after the fact. And I'm not a big proponent of recreations in films, though, to your point, doing it through a cat's point of view is really cute and interesting. But you notice there's like a couple of animated moments in the film,
And
not
that's
too
what I was
many.
going to ask about. Mhm.
Yeah, I do like moments like that kind of paint a picture, because you don't always want a film to just be talking heads telling you things. And there's certain moments in the film where we didn't have, I call it archival footage, but really it's footage that the family had been documenting along the way, and that some of these people that helped them get the cat had videos and pictures they had been taking along the way. And we're so fortunate that they had the presence of mind to do that, because had that not been the case, it would have just been talking heads the whole time, and that can be a little boring. So I like to spice things up with a couple moments of animation and things like that. And we were really lucky that, I don't know what possessed the family to take so many videos and photos of their journey, and what possessed other people to do the same thing. I think they were all just, everybody, whether it was like fleeing the war when it was first happening, and I think they were all just in such a state of shock. And then with trying to get the cat back, they just felt like this was such a big moment. They probably didn't think this footage would ever go anywhere, but they're like, let's just capture it. And I'm so glad they did, because all of that got used in the film. And then, yeah, you just do what you can to make it as interesting as possible.
Well, I know you probably gotten asked this question. How much did it cost to get this cat back? I mean, it seems that the cat had to get a passport and traveling from one country to the other.
Huh. I don't think I've definitely never been asked
Hmm.
that. I've been asked how much the films cost a lot. Um, I've never put that together in my head. It's probably not much. Um, Everything I'm pretty sure was minimal expense wise. Like, for example, the driver Vlad that took the cat across the Ukrainian border, he didn't charge them anything. The people that kept the cat in Bucharest, even the tuk-tuk driver that helped Mimi get to the cat and get to the vet and do all those things. He did it out of the kindness of his heart. He did it for free just because he was so moved by the story. So I don't think there was much with the vets, the passports and all that. Is probably minimal, like $100 or $200 at the most. And even with the flights, all of that was donated. All of those miles were donated. There's actually a amazing Good Samaritan, who we asked if he wanted to be in the film, and he didn't even want to be in the film, because he just does it for, he doesn't do it for the credit, he just does it to do it. But there's a United passenger who has millions of over 1 million United miles. I don't know how this, he had a very successful business and was collecting all these miles, and all he does is donate these miles to helping refugees. So he got the family here for free with donated miles, and he got Mimi to Bucharest and back, and all of it was donated miles. So there was no flight charges at all. So yeah, because there was so much good support from the community, that I'd say there's hardly any cost at all.
Wow, that's good. That's really, really good to know that there are people out there
Yeah.
willing to help. Um, Tell us about the family. How are they doing now? How long has it been since you made the film until now, and how's the family doing?
They're doing great. Let's see. It's been over a year now since I made the film. The big concern that we had, there's a couple things, but the biggest concern we had was that the family was here on a 2-year visa. When the war broke out, that's the quick thing that they just approved for everybody. But there was no plans in Congress to extend that. So the family, it came down to like within a month, the family was going to have to leave. They were going to have to go to Canada, and if something didn't happen, and they're very worried. Their children have acclimated so well here. They're in school. They would have had to start all over again in Canada, which would have just been such a nightmare for the family. And luckily, right around the time of our film's premiere in Santa Barbara, almost, I would say, to the day, maybe like a day or two before, they found out that the government extended their visas and they were able to stay. Now, with that said, I don't know how long that's going to continue. I don't know if that's going to continue forever, if they'll be able to get permanent residence. I hope they do. You know, the father works really hard. They pay their taxes like everybody else. At this point, they're such a vital member to the community. I think at this point, they should be allowed to stay forever. I hope that's the case. Obviously, the children are so, ingrained here now in society, but we'll see. But in the meantime, they're doing great. Their spirits are all fantastic. The youngest daughter, Agnesa, was probably, in my opinion, the most traumatized by all this. If you imagine being that age and having to flee your home in the middle of the night and not knowing where you're going to end up, and then feeling like a family member got left behind with the cat, Arseni. When I first met her, you can see the trauma on her. Like, she was very introverted and like just kind of sad, to be honest with you. And through the process of being able to spend time with her and tell this story, and then seeing her, keeping in touch with the family, and then seeing her at like movie screenings and things like that, it was miraculous to witness her kind of come out of her shell and release that trauma. She's, I feel like, a totally different person right now, in the sense that she just does not seem burdened anymore by that stuff. So I would say that's the thing I'm most happy about.
Right. And your film was, very therapeutic, not only for her, but for the family, and gives hope to people, who have, had a separation through no matter what means. That's good. Let's talk about the ending. There was a song at the end. How did that song come about, and why did you decide to include it?
Well, it just came about really organically because I was mentioning to the family, like, yeah, I'm still trying to figure out the ending. I'm not quite sure what that's going to be. I don't know if it should be like a special song or something. And the daughter, Eleanor, the eldest daughter, is like, well, I knew she was a musician already, but she'd offered to write a song. And I didn't know what it was going to be, if it was going to, when you're making a film, especially the ending of the film, music is very important. It has to fit, or else it can kind of ruin the whole film. So it can, if the mood's not right. So I told her very honestly, I was like, look, I love that idea. I think it's such a cool idea. Hopefully it fits with what we're doing, or it might be hard to fit into the film, or maybe we have to put it somewhere else in the film. But when we got there and she performed the song with her mother, I was like blown away by, first of all, how incredibly she performed the song. It's such a beautiful song, but the lyrics fit the journey she's been on so perfectly. If you really stop and listen to those lyrics, it's called My Journey, and it's all about her and the family's journey here to America, and dealing with all that. And I just realized this is the perfect ending for this film. And yeah, and that's how it is. And it's all because she's so talented, and she recorded such a beautiful piece of music.
It was really nicely done, very fitting as well. Uh, Finally, looking back at the film, I know it's doing well on the festival circuit, and you've seen this so many times. And when you look at it, is there something that you wish you had done differently, or you're just absolutely pleased at how this has turned out?
I think to be totally honest with you, whenever you're making a film, and this has happened with every film I've ever made, in the moment that you're making it, you feel like you're making mistakes, or you feel like, see, the thing is, you have these ideas in your head, right? And no matter how well you plan things out, on the day that you go to shoot them, whether they're a narrative scripted thing or a documentary where things are happening organically in real time, things tend to go in their own direction, regardless of how much you try to control it. It's just the nature of filmmaking. And obviously, you need to be as prepared as possible, because if you're not prepared, you won't be able to pivot and get what you need in those situations. But you have to relinquish a certain amount of control, especially with documentary. So what happens on every documentary, especially I've ever made, is I always feel like, oh, in my head, I had this one idea, but now this other thing is happening, and I'm not quite sure if it's as good as what was in my head. And then when you get into the edit room, what happens is you and your editor, if you're working with an editor, often it can be yourself as well, you have to kind of get to the point, because at first, at least for me, and this is my process, for me, when I'm first watching the footage, I'm still thinking about what I thought should happen or what I wanted to happen. And then eventually you realize, okay, that's great, but now let's focus on what we actually have. Let's look at what actually did happen and what we actually have, and then figure out how can we tell the best possible story based on reality, what we actually have to work with, and not the fantasy of what you thought you were going to get. And that's always a tricky process, and it usually takes time to figure that out. But I will say this, looking back on all of my films, to this day, every single thing that's happened has been a blessing. And even if I was down on it in the moment and I felt like I was failing in some way or not getting what I wanted, when I look back on the finished films, I can't even remember what I was upset about or what I was trying to make happen, because inevitably every film ends up being what it wants to be. And I feel like this film is perfect for what it is. You know, I'm sure there were lots of ideas that I wanted to try and were things I thought were going to happen when we made the film. But to be honest with you, I can't remember them because you forget all that. Once you see the film for what it is and you know that it's working, you're like, oh yeah, I don't even know what I was thinking. Like that this is the film. And that's my dog.
That's fine. That's good advice for our students that are watching on whether or not they're working on a project or paper or a film or something, that, if you dedicate your time to it and due diligence, things will work out in the end, and just stick with it. And I'm glad
I mean, I think that's life advice in general. Like, you know, everybody, we all want to be the masters of our own life and our own directors. And we want to say our life's going to go to here, to here, to here, to here. And the truth is it does, it's going all over the place. And it's good to have goals and thoughts in your mind. And you don't want to like lose track of that stuff, but you also have to be willing to go with the flow. That's the biggest life lesson I've learned anyway.
absolutely, absolutely. Before I let you go, tell us what's next for you. What can we expect to see from you next?
There's a few different possibilities. I'm not currently shooting anything at the moment, but I had a film that kind of went through Cleveland previously called Jack and Sam. There's a really beautiful film about a couple of Holocaust survivors who reunited after 80 years of separation. It's really, really a remarkable story. And there's a documentary about that I made that did really well. And on the heels of that success, I wrote a feature screenplay, and I'm hoping to one day be able to turn that into a feature narrative film. But we'll see. That's a little harder than telling a short documentary, obviously, because it's a feature film and you need because it's a period piece that takes place in the 1940s in another country and in a concentration camp. You need a much bigger budget, obviously. So we'll see. But yeah, I've got a couple other things I'm tinkering with, but I'm always looking for my next project, and I'm always reading through inspirational websites, because when it comes to documentary, that's the thing in particular that I'm most drawn to. There's so many beautiful documentaries that just are just really sad, and that's just not who I am as a filmmaker. When I tell those kinds of stories, I need things that give me hope and inspire me. And so I'm always on the lookout for that. And yeah, if you happen to come across anything, send it my way, because you never know.
Hey, sounds great. Sounds great. All the best to you. And I appreciate you joining us today. And J. Matthew Horowitz, director of Save the Cat. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Eric. It's been a pleasure too. Yeah, take care.
And thank you to our audience for joining us for this important and invigorating conversation. For more information about our upcoming film events, please visit us at clevelandfilm.org. I'm Eric Siler. Thank you.
Thank you.